Okay, let me see. Oh my gosh, why is it so slow today? There you go. Started recording now, so
Rock and roll.
whenever you're ready.
Okay. Great. Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. We see we've got plenty of the usual reps from this group on the phone, but yes, as you might have heard before, Craig's joined and Benjamin or Ben Keenan. I'm guessing you're from MCS as well. Hello, both.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do today, I sent around an email a little earlier. Apologies, it hasn't been sent out too much further in advance. It's been quite busy over here, but just setting out what the expectations are for this session. So we took the decision to proceed with completing the final workshop that we originally identified. So if you just recall, the first one we did, we looked at priority areas to look at. We did digital lamps, and then we had these two follow-up sessions. Lifecycle modeling, and which we did last time out in January, and then moving on to asset criticality. So we've brought something together between Pat and I to work through with the group today. So we'll see how it goes. I'm expecting some good outputs that are useful to report back into the network in any case. But let's be just quite flexible with it as we progress through it. So jumping up to the agenda. I think we've got covered off in terms of everyone who's on the call. I just wanted to touch upon safety and wellbeing moment, which I'll go into. Then we'll take a quick look at the modelling outputs. The workshop 3 outputs that looked at lifecycle modelling. So just a quick refresh to see what we honed it upon as results, and just give you an idea of how we're building that into some work that we're doing on Team 200 to feed into an update to that sub-process. And you'll see how that pans out when we look at asset criticality and prioritization in the workshop proper. We've got Darren joining as a guest as well, and it's likely to probably be involved in some sort of capacity with this work stream into the future, who will go into some technical detail about lifecycle modelling in the Thames Estuary. So Rebecca and Pat are on hand there as well. Pat's probably going to intro that presentation, and that was the 4th one that we didn't quite get to cover in January, which was fine. So for completeness, we'll present that one as well. We're then going to spend about 45 minutes on the workshop itself, and I'll just copy that hyperlink and put it into the chat for later on. So we'll be working on Mural, and I think what I'll do, Cello, because you're recording, I will share screen for that as well. I can't send links into the meeting chat. So I had this problem last time, actually. I can't actually add anything to the chat. So the emailed
Let me see if I can do it.
If you can do it, great, Cello. It's on the agenda. Just copy that link and pop it in. So we'll share screen, but if you can all go into Mural, add your names into there when we get to that session, that will make that a lot easier. And then we should close at around about 10:45 local time here in the UK, so about 5:45 Eastern. Okay, all right. So I'm going to just jump out. Is any questions from anyone on the agenda? Any other business that you want to raise for that last session? Okay, no worries. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I will share just a quick safety moment that's become all too apparent with some of the weather that we've been seeing globally. So this one's just to reinforce to people around taking care of yourselves if you're completing some DIY or home maintenance. So this one was submitted by a colleague of ours, and is checking as you can read there, is checking the roof on his man cave or his garden shed. That's what I expect it was. Some greasy conditions underfoot. Didn't want to use a ladder. Took a shortcut and decided to scale a wall on the edge of his property. So what did that result in? A slip, fall, 7 feet, and some pretty serious injury in terms of bruising and that brief concussion. I know that concussion can sometimes obviously extend over a period of time. So as much as it might have felt brief, I hope he's still okay now. It resonated with me because it was around about a year ago this time that I came out of my flat about 8 p.m. in the evening, so it was quite dark, to the noise of chainsaws and flickering of lights, and found my neighbours who actually had no access to this specific property up a very large plane tree, trying to prune it because they were sick of the leaf drop into their property, which forced me to put a stop to things by asking them to get down from the tree, put their power tools down, and made them aware of the risk that they were putting themselves in terms of that fall from height, not to mention the fact that they were working without appropriate lighting or approval for that matter. So just a reminder, people, please do take care when you're around the house, particularly if you're not in offices, and apply the same sort of stop, review, risk assessment techniques that you would if you're out on site too. Cool. Okay, I'll stop sharing that one and I'll jump back into another screen now. So this one is just going to come back to what we covered off in January. Here we are here. I'll zoom out. So I think it seems like a few people are logged into that one. So it's if that's the link that you've shared, Cello, I might have sent you the wrong link because that was the previous workshop.
Using what Brittany sent right ahead, but it looks like the same link.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, it's the same link.
Is it? Okay.
Is it item 3? Is it item 3? Has the traceability mural? Because
yes, yeah.
Okay, I'm copying that right now, and we'll put it in the mural. Okay.
Great, thanks. And if Brittany, if you're able to add information to the chat, I might.
Yeah, I just reset the correct one. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, you did? Great. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say I could email you and you could add that one in as well, but that's okay. It's fine if people are in there, because that's just what I was going to cover off in terms of what we did last time out. So I'll stay on this screen just for now, just give people a refresh, and also just help Craig and Ben and anyone else who wasn't in that workshop. So what did we do? We had a couple of presentations from some of the utility partners, Doug, Jonathan, and Chris, and then we've got this fourth one which we'll cover off today. So some really great overviews of how lifecycle models are used across those utilities, and Cello actually has a link provided to those as well. I've included it on the agenda further down. You can see them saved there. Sorry, I'm pointing to my screen. No, as you can't see. We then went into a workshop that actually looked at life cycle costs and life cycle models, covered off challenges, the benefits, how it helps or hinders engagement and support, and looked at some of the opportunities, limitations, and efficiencies up in this section here. There were several questions that we still probably need to close out, so I'll pick up with the presenting groups, and we'll probably raise some today on the back of what Pat and Darren will present. It's just to pick those up. So, and there were a couple of general questions too, one of which we've closed off. So it was really good session. And if I just jump into some of the results of what we looked at. So in terms of benefits, there was a good response for the life cycle models, helping with the alignment of budgets with longer term organizational needs. When it came to the challenges of these models, it was a pretty comprehensive response that data quality was the biggest challenge that we faced there. When it comes to engagement and support across our organizations and our utilities, there was 3 themes that emerged around the lifecycle models helping to reinforce the data integrity point, helping with an improved focus on operations and maintenance cost. So that was good. And then also helping to demonstrate a line of sight between strategic objectives of the organization and then works being undertaken or delivered by our field operatives and field colleagues. So that was some good results there. When you look over at the opportunities and limitations, the biggest limitation was similar to the challenges around data quality, was the gaps in the data that you'd need to run some of these models. So what we'll do is we report out for this year are the activities that we've progressed for this topic group. We'll focus on these main sort of points that we've captured on the back of these workshops and just put them forward for either consideration in future tracks of work or groups, or indeed just things to consider as the network continues to evolve. Cool. Did anyone have any comments or lingering questions on the back of that workshop from January? No. Okay, no worries. I'm going to jump out of that mural now then. And Pat, do you want to share your screen with the presentation for yourself and Darren?
Actually, I'm asking Darren to share today because I'm having computer issues joining from my phone.
Do you want, I'll tell you what, I can do it.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, Richard, this is Scott, and I was wondering, you said that there were some questions. So what's the method that you're using to address those again?
So these ones, I didn't follow up on these after the January, but we were going to put them out to each of the responders, each of the presenters, and just see if they could be clarified so that we're coming back with an answer to each of those questions that were raised. Because we're going to cover off, we're probably going to raise some questions on the back of the presentation today. I'll do it to that whole group after this session.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just get this presentation up. Where did I put it in the downloads? Okay, it won't be a moment.
Do you want me to show my screen, right?
It's just opening up now, Darren. So no worries. Open in browser. Okay, so got that there, and then there we go. Okay, you guide me through it, Pat and Dan, and here it is. Okay.
All right. So, hello everyone. We're going to give you an overview of how we use life cycle modeling and how our model works for Team 2100. So if you can please take us to the first slide, Rich. Basically, we have two tools. So yeah, this one, the appraisal lifecycle model and the system lifecycle model. The appraisal one looks at a single asset. So we assess that one asset's life cycle, and the system is looking at a portfolio of assets. And we use it for both our asset management plans and for our contractors plan. So the asset management plans are looking for our catchment units, which we call policy unit, which is a 30-year look ahead. And the contractors plan is basically a 10-year look ahead for only the CapEx plan. So basically the works that Team 2100 is going to undertake. We are going to use the contractors plan as an example to show you what we look at and how we come to it, but the tools work basically in the same way, and Darren is going to show you that right now. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. So what is Contractors Plan 6? Just to really add, that's our medium-term plan in the Thames Estuary. So it's really our 10-year outlook of works that we're planning to do in the estuary. So contains a couple of key things. Number one, it's really our defined scope. So that's kind of what we're calling our backlog, or the work that we know that's going to be taking place. So that could be replacing a revetment or repairing various walls across the Thames estuary. And then the second part is around really our undefined scope. So it's kind of where the AM team at Team 300 kind of slot into this plan, and predominantly where I sit. So when we talk about undefined scope, that's where we know that there is work in the estuary somewhere, but we don't necessarily know where it is or what it is. But we should be thinking about it and starting to think about our resourcing and the funding need in the estuary. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so to calculate that, we in Team 300 we have a whole life cost tool, and yeah, it calculates the undefined scope. Really, we follow quite a simple process, I think. But step one is we think about what are the input parameters to our model, what is the data, where's it coming from. We put that into our model, into our template, and then we basically just run our whole life cost tool. Key part of that is we don't just run our tool once, we run it thousands of times, so we want to understand the spread of results. We want to understand if we manage the estuary in different ways, what value does that give us? So we really want to, I guess, reduce whole life costs as low as possible, but also maximize, I guess, our benefit or the value that we're getting. And from there, yeah, we plot our outputs, and then we can establish where we think the Pareto frontier lies, and then pick out our preferred or our optimum strategy. And then from there, we run that through a Monte Carlo analysis to actually expose any uncertainty around that, and then we can list that as our capital budget that we require in the program or what we think is needed. Okay, next slide, please. So just a little bit about the actual whole life cost tool. So it's kind of made up of 3 discrete components. So the first part is the input data. So that is really in Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. It's got multiple tabs, and it lets us put various asset details or how we want to manage the asset into it. We'll come on to that a little bit later. The next bit is we have a kind of a bespoke calculation engine. We've basically created it in Python code, which obviously allows us to efficiently process large data sets. And then we also have a specific module for enhanced statistical analysis like Monte Carlo, etc. And then the last bit is our interface, where we can actually see the results coming out. So that's a bokeh visualization library. It lets us expose like a dashboard. Okay, next slide, please. So this is effectively the interface, so you can start to see some of the results, and we run our model. So on the left, we've got our controls. So it's where we load our input data. That's where we run our calculations and kind of visualize our outputs. Up in the top, we have our interactions. So whilst we can look at the whole system, we also have the ability to drill into, we call them in the Thames Estuary policy units, but really they're just various geographical areas around the estuary. Our cohort IDs, where they are specific asset types, and then exemplar IDs, which again are a different type of asset type, where they relate very much to the kind of the T2100 plan. And then down at visualizations, we can then start to see the actual results. So on the left, we've got really cost by year. So you can start to see what costs are being incurred in various years. So we've got obviously build, reactive costs, maintenance, repairs, replacements, any raising that could take place. And then on the right, we cut it in a slightly different way, but this is then just as a cumulative cost by year. Okay, next slide, please.
I'll just say, Darren, if people want to jump in with questions as Darren is going through, feel free to do so. Just throw your hand up or jump in.
Yes.
So do those costs, Darren, include capital and O&M, or is it just capital, or what?
So it's both. Yeah, it's both capital and operational. So we look at what the impact of, when we're doing our whole life cost modeling, we would like to do everything, but then in terms of putting into the contractor's plan, we just put the capital budgets in.
Hey, Darren, it's Mart with Portland Water. Hey, real quick, I was just curious more than anything else. I don't know, I guess the nature of the assets you are trying to model here is I'm guessing that the variation of the attributes for the input is, large enough to justify sort of like the multiple Monte Carlo runs. What kind of attributes are you changing?
So we're changing in terms of attributes. So we're looking at deterioration. So deterioration can be altered by the different standards of maintenance. So, sorry, we'll start from the beginning. So when we think of what our assets are, we're obviously managing a flood risk management system. So in terms of the asset types, we have like sheet pile walls, or we have vertical masonry walls, or we have earth embankments, and they all undergo slightly different deterioration processes and have different types of maintenance strategies that can be applied to them. And then depending on the type of maintenance that can be undertaken in the system, that can have different results and impact the whole life cost.
Oh, yeah, I see. Thank you. That's great.
That's okay.
We've got a question from Jonathan as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, I was curious about the input data and how much of that is estimated based on like engineering judgment, or how much of that is collected via like actual asset histories, stuff like that.
So it comes from a number of things. So we have, in terms of actual asset condition, that is undertaken by the Environment Agency, and they have asset inspectors who go out and assess every asset in the estuary every 6 months on average. And then, so we have quite reliable or quite recent condition data. In terms of the cost data sets, we don't have, it's obviously, we can always get better data, but we're relying predominantly on our overarching strategy called T2100. And then our deterioration curves, they are really a product of some national research that has been looking at how assets deteriorate over time, and then kind of the benefits of any maintenance on those assets. But there's obviously continuing research and things like that are looking at those sort of things, and we try to use the best available information.
Richard Lingier has a question as well.
Go, Lingier.
Yeah. Hi. Right. So my question relates to similar to what Jonathan asked, right? So do you track actual cost data at asset level, or for this projection that you use more like model based, or so how like the cost data or life cycle cost do you track at asset level, and do you actually use, say, for financial data to get actual acquisition cost at asset level, or how do you get to the asset level life cycle cost?
So predominantly, again, it's kind of linking back to our strategy at the moment. There's still, I guess, I don't know what's the word. I guess our program is still relatively young, so we're kind of building up that data set at the moment. It's kind of very much a watch the space for kind of, I guess we're on that journey to making better data.
Right. Understood. Thank you. One more. Do you check these, like do backtracking, like so your projections compare with your actual spending, or just some kind of analysis like that?
To an extent, yeah. Again, I guess we're in year 5 or 6, so of the strategy, we haven't. The level of construction on the ground since the analysis has begun I guess it's quite limited still, so we're still in very much in like a planning phase.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Cool. Some good questions. Keep them coming in. Scott, if you see any hands go up, please do shout out. I'll push on for you, Darren. I've captured those questions, by the way, as well. Good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so in terms of, so this is just quickly about the condition grade system. So as I mentioned, the Environment Agencies have an asset condition grade system, and every asset in the Thames estuary is, or actually nationally within England, is rated between 1 and 5. So 1 being very good, poor, very poor being 5, and generally they try to target to maintain their conditions around 2 and 3. So when we talk about our model, we're actually trading condition of the assets against cost. So we'll be moving moving assets from condition grade 4 or condition grade 3 back to 2 or 1. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of the actual input data. So kind of touching on some of the earlier questions, really, these are the things that we think about when we're putting into our model. So we have asset type, so that's really about the function of the asset, its material it's made of, etc. The asset length, so obviously how long is the asset. Its starting condition grade, again coming from the inspectors. We have our deterioration rate, so that's the rate of change in condition in the future. And each asset has a suite of curves. So they have 9 curves each. And we think of deterioration in terms of fast, medium, and slow. And then we have maintenance regimes, MR1, MR2, MR3. So MR1 is kind of a do nothing maintenance, and MR3 is where we're starting to do much higher levels. And then in terms of what types of work we'll undertake on the assets, we are really with intervention types. So that's kind of what is the scopes of work. So we're going to be doing minor, major refurbishment, are we rebuilding the asset, or are we raising it? And tied closely to that is really our unit cost assumption. So what is the activity cost and scale of works required? And then we also have our financial discounting. So that obviously that changes the value of money, deals with how value of money changes with time. And then really lastly is our length of appraisal period. So when we're thinking of planning or analysing our whole life costs, how long are we pushing out into the future? In the Thames estuary, we really think of things around 100 years. And then lastly is any uncertainty. So how confident are we in our input assumptions? And we spend a lot of time around the level of maintenance that's being undertaken in the estuary, or what is the starting condition grade? How will that impact what we think is our strategy? Okay, next slide.
So Darren, this is Scott. I had a question also. Are you projecting useful lives of these assets as they deteriorate? And are you, on your projections, how far out do you go in terms of life cycle costs?
So the life cycle costs, we go out to 100 years. In terms of useful projections of life, we don't necessarily interrogate things at an asset level at this point. We're kind of trying to calculate what we think the capital budget will be for the program, and then we'll kind of have processes put in place like enhanced, I don't know, maybe enhanced inspections, things like that, trying to find where we think the assets are.
Cool. And we've got one from Ben Keenan as well. Ben, you've got your hand up. Feel free to jump in. Nope, his hand's gone down. Maybe that was the same question. Cool. I'll just put.
Sorry. Oh.
You there? You back?
Yeah, I put myself on mute by mistake.
Yeah, no worries.
There's a question regarding the uncertainty and how you factor that in, and whether is that related to the the general deterioration, or do you take account of random defects occurring throughout the group of assets as well?
That's a good question. We kind of think of it in terms of the maintenance that we can undertake on the asset. So we have some reasonable data to show kind of what's actually happening to the asset base. And so if you do this, if you continue to do this, so I don't know, 40% of if we undertake maintenance, only 40% of our asset, what would that do to the whole life cost? Or if we could up that to 80% or 90%, what would that do to the whole life cost? And in terms of the uncertainty, then we can start to put specific probabilities around the maintenance regime.
Okay.
We've recently been working through it with the asset inspectors as well. So as a sort of a user group, to get their thoughts on whether some of those assumptions around the asset condition as it's shown at the moment is reflective or not. So there's a bit of uncertainty around whether that's actually presenting a true picture of asset condition in the estuary at the moment. And then just the other thing I'll point out as well, and Rebecca knows this, is that the maintenance regime, looking at basic maintenance through to enhanced maintenance, is quite a challenging regime to pin down. It works well in the model, but the challenge there is that the Environment Agency doesn't own a lot of its asset stock. So there's a requirement on a third party, what we call a riparian owner, to complete that maintenance. So coming up with an assessment of what that level of maintenance is across those groups is quite challenging.
Richard and Darren, I mean, there's a question here from Craig in a second, but yeah, on your Pareto, and it sounds like what you have is, here's a funding level, you do a Pareto analysis, and an analytical process to come up with what your highest priority assets are to invest in, maybe. And Craig is asking, are you using a risk criticality rating to prioritize the capital funding and the schedule?
Cool.
Do you want to
You
answer
can.
that now?
Yeah, I think I think the second question we'll take into the workshop, because I think it's a question we've almost got ourselves. So the model has started to look at risk. It generally looks at flood risk. So what happens if there's a breach in the asset, but generally not more than that. So that's part of the challenge we've got in the Thames Estuary, is coming up with what those other risk factors are. And then the first question on Pareto, Darren, do you want to cover that one?
So we're predominantly really. Well, we will get onto the Pareto bit in a bit. Maybe we'll leave it till we get to the
Let's do
Pareto
that.
analysis.
Yep. Hold your thoughts, Scott.
Yep.
Do you want to? Sorry, go back one slide.
Sorry. Yeah.
So at the beginning, kind of at the start, we're talking about how we'd run thousands of different scenarios. So we want to understand. We're trying to understand what we think optimum will look like for these assets. So we want to know how many repairs should we probably be favouring when we're looking at the assets. At what point do we actually want to step in and do something to the asset? And then if we do step in to repair the asset, what is the benefit of that? Are we going to improve it by one condition grade? Are we going to improve it by up to 3 condition grades? And then the last step is that we want to be testing is at what point should we be thinking about triggering any replacements? Do we leave it at condition grade 4, or do we try and push it out as far as possible? So now we're kind of running multiple scenarios which are testing different combinations of these to kind of tell us what we think is the least cost, most optimal solution. Okay, next slide. That's just kind of a quick example of what whole life cost looks like in the estuary. So in terms of the red dashed line, that's kind of forecast conditions. So you can kind of see on the right axis condition grade. So high at the top of the graph is condition grade 1, and then you can see some deterioration dropping down to around condition grade 3.5. And then on the blue graph, that's kind of triggering our capital interventions, and that's creating like a cumulative whole life cost. Okay, next slide. So this is really just a kind of an output now of our whole life cost tool. So we've run it 2,000 times. We varied all the input parameters per run, and when we then start to interrogate the results, the outputs are really presented as a relationship between the total discounted cost and then the proportion of asset length that we consider in poor condition. So that's really in terms of the EA or nationally, they think of poor condition as around grade 4 or worse. Do you want to move on, please? So if we just look at this graph here, so on the right axis, you've got proportion of asset length in poor condition, and then on the top we've got total discounted cost. So what we're trying to aim for or trying to identify is what solutions sit in the top right, or that little red box there. So that's where the optimal solutions lie, or where we're getting best condition of our assets, but then also for the least whole life cost. So the next step is really, okay, we move on, please. Actually, yep, there's also another way that we can also interrogate the results. We can then start to see some other interesting relationships. So what happens if we don't repair our assets and we just leave them to, I guess, deteriorate to the very end of their life, and then we do a like for like replacement. So what you're seeing on red there in the red dots are effectively, it's basically that. So we're seeing high whole life costs and also assets in pretty poor condition. The next one, please. And then if we then flip it the other way, and then we actually look at what does timely intervention look like. So that's where we're thinking we're going to intervene earlier in the asset base. So that could be around condition grade 3.5 or condition grade 4. We're going to favour increasing the number of repairs that we can undertake during its life cycle. Those repairs occur earlier, and then we're not looking for massive changes in condition. We're just going to do small changes. So really much it's little and often when the way we're managing our assets. And up in the top right, they're kind of the best performing results. And then the last step is effectively we've once we understand what the criteria in that top right box, what looks optimal, then we then push that through our Monte Carlo analysis. So then we're starting where we then expose, I guess, the uncertainties around our starting condition grades or the level of maintenance that is actually viable in the estuary. Then that effectively gives us our final our forecast for the next 5 to 10 years in the estuary. I think next slide. And then this is really just kind of just some next steps that we're trying to improve on our model. So the first really is about carbon sustainability. How would that change our strategy? Would we still want to do little and often in the estuary, or are we going to favour larger capital schemes? That's kind of we don't necessarily know the answer to that at the moment, but it's something that we're very keen to understand in the next year or so. Reduce our uncertainty, our input data. So there's obviously a lot of work that we can do to improve on that, and we can work with our teams in the estuary. And then lastly is really exploring the results further to better understand other metrics. So it's all very well having all these cool tools, but fundamentally, is the preferred scenario, is it actually deliverable, or what does it actually mean for the estuary? So they're kind of things that we're starting to get into at the moment.
Cool. Thank you, Darren. So just I think on that last slide there, the reduction in uncertainty in the input data probably draws on the question you asked, Jonathan, just around what's the intention there. So there's condition grade. There's also the idea of having a better understanding of the asset defects and their contribution to asset performance, to build that into the model. We're starting at a fairly small scale with that, and then further explore the results and understand other metrics. Talks to your question, Craig, around criticality and understanding how you could get to a point of prioritizing once you understand what your investment strategy might be, if there is constraints applied to the organization, which could be funding, location, geography, space, etc. So yeah, great. Thank you very much, Darren and Pat. We've just run a few results for one of the models in one of the policy units at the moment. So I'll put you on the spot, Rebecca. But is there anything you wanted to add in terms of what you're seeing for some of the policy units in your catchments? I can't speak. No, you're right.
No, I was going to say, yeah, nothing. I couldn't come off mute. Nothing
Right.
really specific. I think all of the things, all of the questions people have asked, and these next steps are really where we are at the moment. And it's really interesting that the questions people have had have all been the same questions we've had as we've gone through the process.
Yeah, I've had my video on, so you've probably seen me smiling, putting a wry smile when I've heard those questions come through. So it's good to see that others have very similar questions. You're right. Great. Okay. Thank you very much,
Richard.
Yeah.
This is
Go
Mark.
ahead.
Sorry to just barge in. I'm just curious. So many parameters are changing. Obviously, if a bunch of assets, but what was it, like 30 or 100 years of modeling? I'm just curious, how long does it take to go through these 2,500? To process that, like the 2,500 runs. Is it like a run?
So to get the results out, get the model to run and get it out, and to actually look at it takes probably a day or two. Most of the time is really in interrogating the results and understanding what's happening and how the different how sensitive the things are to different, I guess, input parameters.
Right. Cool. Great. Thanks.
Cool. I was thinking you might have just said a click of the finger, Darren, but reality is not the case at all. Yeah, you're right. Okay, great. So thank you for just allowing us the opportunity to close that one out in terms of finishing that last presentation as well. We're going to jump into the workshop now. Okay, so we've got about half an hour for it. So time's tracking okay. If you can, those who have access to the mural link that's posted in the chat, jump on in and I will talk you through that way and share my screen at the same time. So close that one down. Where are we? I'm here. Okay. There it is. Okay, great. I can see lots of people there, which is good. I'll just share screen so you've got it on the recording cello. That's the one there. Okay, grand. Okay, so I'll just ask people to follow me and we'll go through what we're going to cover off on this workshop here today. So I'm over here in the introduction. So we've got a couple of things that we just want to look at. So questions that have been raised actually in that presentation that we've seen themes of in the other presentations when we looked at lifecycle modeling as well. So discussion and identification of some of the ways in which we across our own utilities currently assess asset criticality. And then secondly, go in and look at the prioritization processes we currently use. So the idea being that the small piece of work that we'll do to look at the criticality sub-process in the future, it's not one we're looking at specifically at the moment, but it's one that we have flagged, can help inform that development too. I'm going to jump down and just go back to Mural again. So hopefully most of you are familiar with it now. So use the scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom. You can create new post-its by selecting the windows at the left here. I've got most of them spread out in the two specific sections that we'll be working on today. So it's probably just a matter of selecting and using Control D on your keyboard, or double clicking with the left mouse button next to one of those to create a new one. So you can see me do that just there in creating some green and purple post-its. So if you want to have a go at that, you're welcome to. Comments we shouldn't need too much of, but Pat and I and Darren will probably use those if we do need to just note a comment next to anything. And then when it comes to voting, we'll be doing two voting sessions today, and then actually dragging some of the results through to top results boxes, as you'll see. It's a matter of selecting the squares that you want to vote on. So you'll see if you get 3 votes, you'll get 3 little squares that are little circles that look like this. I'll zoom in. That apply to you. You'll see those drop onto the boxes where your selections are. So we'll come to that when we vote. We've got a bit more time this week because there's 2 sections when we look at voting. Okay, just going to quickly refresh on, and it's very, very good to see Craig, you here today, because we're just going to do a quick refresh on the to be process. All right, and just quickly summon people over here, so we'll work through that. So this is what we came up with last year for those who were involved in recall. So we looked at what the ideal to be process was for developing an AMP. So scope and approach at that steering committee level. We will come back to that when we get to the review stage, dropping down into the group and development function and that team having good representation, and then going into the specific development team and these activities down here. We've spent a lot of time at this level throughout the course of this year, I'd say, just in terms of talking about data, quality, availability, the development schedule and how that relates to the digital AMP that we've seen examples of, and then more laterally getting into the idea of criticality, lifecycle modeling, and coming up with those management strategies. So we've done a lot of work around here, and what we're going to output with, and I'll just jump onto the next table as well, which is a zoom in of some of that lower level activities. Is the criticality and risk sub-processes. Okay, so if I just summon you all to here now, you should see me. So I'm down in the 4th section. So we've looked at data sources and we've covered off some of that in the presentations last time out. That was a big topic of discussion in the digital AMP overview as well in that session we did. There's been discussion around asset replacement values and then obviously service levels as well, because there were some differences across our respective utilities. We're now looking at sort of this point here. So we're going to talk about criticality and risk today and how we get to prioritization. And then I've just highlighted over here, well, I've highlighted the risk assessment because there's 2 flows that you can go through here, which we spoke about. Yes, you have criticality and risk ratings available, so you review those. Some organizations or utilities might not have that, in which case there's a specific risk assessment activity that's undertaken there. We might get into that depending on some of the outputs of today. what I wanted to just highlight here as well in terms of developing management strategies, we're going to look at this sub-process to outline some of the lifecycle modeling that's work that we've heard about, and then present that back around to the group. So we're working a pretty tight timescale in terms of getting back to John and Mike, the process overview sort of by the end of this week, but at the same time we still want to pass it to this group for some feedback across March. So keep an eye on your inboxes for that one over the next month or so as we complete the report out for this year. Cool. So a very quick run through of the to be processes there. That information is available on the Teams pages, but any just swift observations before we get into the workshop proper?
Thank you for going back to the business process, Richard, because that is the overall context that we're using. And I can see Mike Barnett is probably smiling all the way through this aspect, which is pretty cool. But I like the way that you're relating the work that this team has done this year, or over the last year, back to the original model that we had. That was great.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
it's Richard. It's really a good contribution. Thank you.
No worries. I mean, the contribution was very much the team who did it last year. So yeah, the intention there is to get it refreshed in front of people's minds. Okay, so keep an eye on some of these sub processes that we'll look to develop in future years, but also specifically one around the management strategies and how some of the life cycle modeling work we've looked at can help articulate that. Okay, let's get into it. We are going to jump over to, we've got two sections today, all right? So I'm just going to summon you all over here. We've got about 15 minutes for this, so 10 minutes and then 5 minutes of taking a look at some of the results. Now, have I captured all the utilities? I had to quickly add in MCES when I saw Craig and Ben on the call today. Am I missing out on anyone? I think I've got it all covered. Okay, great. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate yourself to your own utility. Okay, and we're going to spend 10 minutes or so just documenting using these sticky notes. So you might want to zoom right in so you can check your typing. Some of the ways that you currently across your utility assess criticality. Okay, is it by asset type? I'll put some examples up there. Is it probability of failure that dominates it? Is it consequence of failure, etc.? So there's no right or wrong answer here necessarily, because I expect there's going to be different inputs. But related to some of those questions that we saw in the presentation, if we could start to document some of those, that would be great. Spent about 10 minutes doing it. You're welcome to ask questions over the phone as we go. I'll be zooming around and adding some myself as well. And then we'll get to a point where we look at some of the results towards the end and spend some time reviewing that as well. Are people comfortable with using Mural? If you're not, please do shout out and we can look to add in your contributions using the chat function. Okay, no worries. Well, let's put on about 9 minutes for this and we'll get stuck into it. So if you can't think of any in terms of what you do within your own utility at the moment, feel free to scoot over and navigate around the page to see what some of the other utilities are putting in to help jog your memory or just to think about and consider. Okay, and if you want to create a new sticky, just remember you can double click next to one that already exists, or you can select one from over at the left of screen where you've got the options on the left side. So we're looking at assessing criticality here. The second part that we'll go into will be around prioritization, okay? So this one's just about criticality. I don't think we've got Paul or Tiz on the line, do we? We don't have anyone from Clean Water here today. That's all right. Good. And Scott, I might get you to just keep an eye on the chat if anyone's making some contributions in there. I can't see it.
So far, nobody has. Yeah.
No worries. Yeah, see the triple bottom line coming through in yours, Mert. That was definitely mentioned by Doug last time out, which was good. And I think you did as well, didn't you, Jonathan? Okay, so that's in terms of using criticality and risk differently. That's a good one to tease out as well, because I think that talks to your question, Craig, to an extent. I think, Brittany, you've added desktop performance scores, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so what do you mean by that? Is it the desktop assessment that you make?
Yeah, so we basically look at current and future needs, starting with
Yep.
like capacity and regulatory issues, reliability, obsolescence, technology.
Cool. Okay, I think bear some of those in mind for sure when we come to the prioritization section too, so that's good. Great. Okay, we'll give it another minute or so. These are great contributions here. Hey, buddy. Okay, give it another 30 seconds or so. I know we've got 2.5 minutes left, but finish off contributions. Okay. Great. All right, I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to end that one now because I think there's a fair bit to go through and read. So keep adding them if you want to. The time is sort of irrelevant now. But what we're going to do is, I think there's going to be some transfer of some of the things we've recorded here, which is fine, into the methods or themes that the utilities are using to evaluate impact. So I expected this to be quite a generic sort of response, which is good. So for now, if you could all, if you've finished typing in what some of the ways you assess criticality are, jump on in and take a look at what some of the other utilities have put down, and see if any of those resonate with you. What we're going to do is just spend a minute or two doing that, and then we're just going to take a vote, and I'm going to give everyone 5 votes just to sort of pick those criticality sort of measures that are there to put into, well, to come through into our top results to take forward. Okay, so just spend a couple of minutes doing that. I'll put a timer on for that. Then it's going to be tricky because I'll give a minute for everyone to vote once we get to the end of that. Cool. Okay, just under a minute, so keep scooting around to the different contributions. Okay, I'll end the timer there, but I'll get a voting session started up. Okay, so what I want people to do now is take a look at criticality assessment. Okay, we're going to get 5 votes. Okay, and what you could do, you see it pop up on your screen, it says begin voting. So again, just circle back around the mural, and just if there's one of these that resonates with you in terms of a way in which you can assess criticality, just click it and that'll give it a vote. Okay, it can be your own, it can be those from others as well. So we're just going to look at the results at the end and take across the top 5. Cool, we've still got a few people with votes left, which is fine. Okay. Good. I'll jump in. So you should have seen how I voted if you're looking on screen. And then that's good. So still a few people with votes left. Okay, I'll just wait on the shark, the raccoon, and Pat. And Ben, I see you're making votes now as well, so that's all good. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so. Okay, 1 second. All right, I'm going to end it there. We've got fairly good votes cast, so I'm going to end that for everyone. Sorry if you haven't got your votes in, but we'll push on. Okay, so this is cool. So now we can kind of see the unique voters here. So this one here, linking assets to the service risks per established levels of service. Okay, as a criticality assessment, that one resonated with a lot of people. Monetized consequence of failure score. So we'll come into that. I think that monetized element in the next section as well. Consequence of failure for linear assets depends on the asset attributes, location, linear assets, asset-specific consequence of failure scoring. So that seems to resonate across the group as well. A thick asset level consequence of failure, and then the asset system consequence is clear across utilities too. So I will take some of those results there in terms of the 8s and the 3s and put them into that sort of that top results box that we've got, we can see there. Cool. Just any observations from people on the line before we move on to the next section? No worries. Okay. We are going to push on down to, that's taken me to the wrong location, sorry. We're going to go down to this criticality analysis and prioritization. So it's the section down below where we've got the same format once again. So some of the responses that I've just sort of read through up there, there's 2 things here, and what I didn't put in, Pat, was that line, did I? So we're looking at methods or themes, okay, your utility uses to evaluate the impacts of those critical impacts and help to prioritize asset investment and improvement. Okay, so you might have a probability impact sort of method that you use, all right? That would be an example of a method, or there could be specific themes. So we saw that monetized themes, so it's based on money. It could be based on, as you put in for Tacoma, Jonathan, political pressure or news, so reputational elements. So I want you to cover those 2 things off. I'm going to make it easier. Pat's just sort of separated them down the middle. So there's, put the methods on the left under your utility, and then some of the themes that you use. So it could just be sort of single terms on the right. And then we've got the separation. So we'll do 2 votes at the end of this, one for methods and one for themes. Pat, if you can try and sort of sort those as we go through, that would be great. All right, tuck in people. If you've got questions around that, just ask. And we'll spend about 8 minutes doing that and see how we go. Cool. Was that someone moving something? Oh, we'll try and add a line in. Okay, and just so people know where we are, I will summon you all over here. Okay, so again, just zoom in and out to make use of it. Here we go.
And Jonathan had to hop off, so you're
no worries.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll bring some of his down because he did mention a few up there. That's easy to transfer. So if you do want to scroll up and refer to some of the contributions you made in the earlier section, please feel free to do that. So yeah, Brittany, some of the things you started explaining to me around that desktop performance is, I think, what we try and capture under yours as well. Nice. Okay, excuse me for those that are looking on screen. I'm just going to jump up to the previous one to bring down some of Tacoma's.
And we might need a bit more time to look through those before we vote, Rich, because there's a lot.
Yep, that's all right. I know we're at about 1:45 at the moment, so we've got about 15 minutes. Okay, I'll leave it on. So we should spend about 4 minutes each. What I'll do is, rather than giving time to review, we'll just go straight into a 4-minute block of voting and allow people to take a look that way as well. But that's cool. Yeah, this is great. This is really good.
Yes, question for everyone. Is it worth to have us reading through things? Or are you doing it as you go?
I'll try and pick up some of the methods that are just sort of duplicated across different utilities. So triple bottom line is mentioned again in terms of the methods. Yeah, so criticality in terms of asset failure is one of the methods as well. That's used as a decision-making driver. Yeah, I can see actually just on yours, Mert, the inputs for triple bottom line. So that's interesting. Health and safety, direct cost, indirect cost, image equity, service. Cool. Decay modeling as a method. That probably resonates with, just see whether we've captured it on team. Desktop assessments, I would put in the defect analysis too. Cool. Some of the themes, safety, risk to life, I can see that that's definitely recurring across plenty. Safety, risk to customers, risk to public. Impact to technology, so maybe an infrastructure type of impact, referenced by you there, Brittany. Metro and Chris, I see you've got social impacts in there. That's a good one. We're trying to quantify some of the social impacts on work in the Thames Estuary across the Environment Agency too. Compliance, environmental compliance. Level of effort to maintain or repair asset as a theme too. So regulatory requirements does seem to cross plenty, as does level of service. So just check that those themes are, yeah, level of service is definitely there, which you'd expect. So that's good. Okay, so yeah, it might be that the themes are going to be a slightly easier review than the methods. Cool. I'll just do a quick double check for Tacoma. Good. I've got redundancy there. Okay. Nice. Okay, so we've got 20 seconds left. I think most people are scooting around now, taking a look at others' themes, which is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the voting session first. So we're going to do 2 here. Again, I'll give most votes. So methods. And I will start that up now. So we're going to give 4 minutes for that, everyone. You'll see it begin voting a session. So if you, what it will mean now is you can't actually add any more methods or themes, because creating a new sticky will mean a vote that you're adding. So take 4 minutes or so just to go around and take a look at what everyone else has put in, and we're looking at methods to start with. So pick 5 methods in total. Ad hoc. Good addition. I'm going to give a vote to ad hoc and suggest everyone else puts in ad hoc. Metro Vancouver making use of the gurus for methods. That's good to see. Okay, nice. Everyone's getting through it, so we will make use of that last minute. If you've cast all your votes, feel free to get yourself ready for the themes that are going to be coming up next. And what I'll do at the end of this session, or until people have finished, I will start that one if we get all the votes cast. Okay, just about there. Okay, I'll wait on one more vote from the visiting raccoon. Done. Okay, let's end that one. Let's see what the results are there. So I expect a bigger spread. Okay, so risk matrix, or qualitative risk matrix, that comes up as one of the methods. Oh, we've got a rogue unique voter on the blank square. So let's ignore that one and jump down to 3 votes. So condition-based prioritization, defect analysis, triple bottom line, the workshop-based discussion with SMEs, so that guru qualitative assessment probably is different to the risk matrix. Condition monitoring, downtime and risk related to redundancy, and multiple probabilities of failure per asset mode. So that's where you captured that MERT in terms of imminent failure being a decision driver. Cool. Okay, I'm going to restart the next voting session, everyone. So this is now looking at prioritization themes. Okay, so again, I'll throw 3 votes into the mix this time because there's slightly less themes. Sorry, 4 votes. Won't be too harsh. And we'll get going on that now. So you should see the begin voting pop up on your screen. And looking at the time, we'll go with 4 minutes for that one as well. All right, or until everyone's finished. That'll take us up to pretty much up to time. I think when we report this one out, we'll probably group a few of the similar votes together, only because if you look through themes here, you'll see level of service mentioned a few times, everyone. So don't worry if you're struggling to select which level of service. We can group those together. Cool. Give it 1 more minute. So if you've finished voting, feel free to scoot around. Just watch where you click in case you take yourself off a vote. And I think the visiting duck, whoever that might be, looks like you're voting. I wasn't sure whether you were before, so I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. No worries. I can also see if there's any stray votes that have been cast on other stickies, blank stickies this time. It looks like we're okay. No, actually, I have no idea because I can't see anyone else's votes. Okay, I'm going to end that voting session there. Right, let's see. So resilience, that came up in terms of assets' ability to resist or recover from a failure, impact to current and future level of service. So here's where I expected some duplication to happen for those that can see on screen. So level of service referenced in this one, the purple one, the pink one, and in the grey one down here. So we can group those ones together. But interesting, the social impact's got a few votes, risk to life with some votes there as well. So we'll try and carry forward some of these that are similar in there in what they're talking about from the level of service perspective. Health and safety, probably group that into risk to life. You can see there's similar synergies there as well. Okay, that's great. Everyone, well done. Another rapid fire workshop session. But if I just zoom out for 2 sections, there's some really great contributions there from everyone. And you can see that the spread from across the utilities is great as well. I know we don't have a few people on the call today, but it's great to see the range of considerations that you've all put forward. Time is up. Cool. So next steps, we'll go through and review the top results based on the votes, put those into the boxes and then include those in some of the report out. The questions that were captured from Darren's presentation, I've put those into the other mural that you saw the link for earlier on. So I'll put those into a sheet and just send those out to the utilities who presented in January. Apologies if your memory will need to be jogged for those questions, but hopefully it's okay. And then what we'll do is take some of these forward as suggestions for looking at in the future. In the meantime, we will also reach out with towards the end of this week, have their first view on what some of that sub process is around the management strategies and where the life cycle modeling fits in. Okay, so that's great. I'm going to just stop presenting here. We didn't have anything for the parking lot, and just quickly go back to agenda and throw out a call for any other business from people.
Hey, Richard, this is Scott. I just comment that there
Yep.
exists a risk management group, and Rebecca, Chris, maybe somebody else on the call is working with that team, but you've noticed some overlap, and this is really good, information that could be of use to that team as well. And there's going to be a workshop that they're going to put on later on after they finish with their exercise or their groundwork that they're working on. And I think members of this team would, like to participate in that as well.
That sounds good. Yeah. I think we could pass across a lot of the outputs here from an AMP perspective. I think what we've seen across the people and the sort of the cultural aspects that we've covered off in the AMP, the digitization piece and the lifecycle piece, they're useful for those other groups as well. That's a nice segue, Scott, as well for the next workshop and the next session we'll have as well. So Mike Sweeney's going to do some presentation. All right, and we'll probably do a short workshop exercise after that as well, which again will pull on some of the themes that that Mike's going to discuss around challenges that the organizations had that we can feed into some of the other topic groups as well. All right.
And Richard, I think that he's going to cover, which is relevant to this group too, when you're developing these plans, the whole people side of the business and how that gets integrated. I know that's something you're interested in too, Richard.
That's right. Yep. So I think it'll have that people focus in the next session from Mike. So we're going to try and structure it around some of the outputs that we've had from our earlier workshops, the murals that we've done as a starting point for Mike to work from after his presentation, and all of us to then go into that workshop session.
Richard, this is Mike Sweeney. When is the next session?
Mike, we've got it for 2 weeks, okay, in 2 weeks' time. So it should be that works out to be the 9th.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Yep.
Okay.
So hopefully that gives you enough time just to polish that presentation. If you aim for 20 minutes, sounds good. And that'll give us time to run a workshop following.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. Okay.